I even love the smell of books.
Hello and welcome to Tsundoku, the podcast for people who sometimes tell themselves to put down the book and to go and do something. I'm Michaela Andreas.
And I'm Kath Keneally. Michaela, what have you been reading?
I have been reading a book for my book club called The Accident by Fiona Lowe, and actually Sarah spoke to Fiona in our 40th episode of Tsundoku about this book. I have to say it's not a literary masterpiece. Mm-hmm. It's a rollicking read, though. It does provide entertainment. It centres on an accident that happened on a country road that disrupts a wedding, and then the disruptions caused by that disrupt a whole town. It's got a number of themes, but I guess the central theme is how well do we really know anyone, particularly the people that are closest to us. So it's a good mystery. It's got a lot of detail. I think some people will enjoy that. For me, maybe there was just a little bit too much. It might have sort of slowed it down a fraction. But it's a classic beach read, as they used to say back in my publishing days. Fiona was a romance author, so it's got a bit of romance to it as well. So
they all have, haven't they? There's always that.
A bit of mystery, a bit of romance. So yeah, if you feel like a good old read, then The Accident might be the one for you. What about you, Kath? Have you been sort of getting something from a higher shelf in the bookshop?
No, I couldn't say that. I have been submerged in crime fiction for a judging gig, crime fiction from last year, crime fiction not published in Australia. So I've read a couple that I've had on my list and hadn't got around to that I thought were pretty fantastic. One is Nikki French's latest. It's called Has Anyone Seen Charlotte Salter? Uh-huh. And another one that stood out for me is by Charity Norman, whose name I knew, but I'd never followed her up. Turns out she was born in Zimbabwe, I think, and she says she grew up in rural vicarages in Yorkshire and Birmingham. So I'm suspecting she was the child of perhaps a missionary family.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then she worked for the BBC. She's done everything and then started writing. And she's won lots of awards and been a Richard and Judy choice in the UK. And this one is called Home Truths. So she lives in Auckland now. And it's about a father in a family that's had a tragedy who goes down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and more or less never comes up. And the book, goes on. The story, I think they're looking for the child, goes on around him. And it's kind of terrifying, really, very well written and very believable. And in fact, the book we're going to come back to later is also focusing around, a lot of books at the moment are focusing around people who are lost to conspiracy theory groups.
These are the times we live in.
These are the times we live in.
What award did you say that was?
It's the Ned Kelly International Crime Fiction Award. So
and you're a judge?
I'm one of the judges for that, yeah.
So really, you're pretty happy. You've got crime books piled up all around you, and you just have to read your way out of it.
And as you say, you don't tell yourself to put down the book and go and do something, because you are doing something by reading the book. That's the best place to be in.
Oh, you've nailed it, Kath.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I should tell you about the book that I'm bringing to the podcast today. It's called Landfall by James Bradley. Now, James has won or been shortlisted for a huge array of literary prizes. He's been awarded the Medal for the Order of Australia for service to literature as a writer. But just having read his latest novel, I think he deserves an award for keeping me up at night, long after I should have been asleep. I work in breakfast radio, and it takes a pretty good book to keep me up past 10 or 20 pages at night, and his certainly did. And then once I went to sleep, it actually also permeated my dreams. It's what I guess they're calling these days cli-fi or climate fiction. Definitely a book for our times. And I look forward to sharing it with you a little later in the podcast.
I'm looking forward to that.
And what about you, Kath? What are you going to bring?
I'm talking with Catherine Jinks about her latest novel. It's a rural noir offering called Panic. Now, I knew her originally as a children's writer. Speculative fiction for children. She's won the Children's Book Award. She's won a Centenary Medal for contribution to children's lit. And she's written a lot of science fiction as well and won awards for that, the Aurealis Award. But of late, she's been writing thrillers, one after the other: Shepherd, Shelter, The Attack, and Traced. This one is called Panic, and it's told in the voice of Bronte, who's escaping to the country because of the fallout of the posting online of her revenge text to a cheating boyfriend.
Oh, no.
Posted
Never put it in writing.
Exactly. And the fallout's been extremely nasty, and she goes off to the country with a help X post to a big house called Gwendolyn House, and the plot thickens from there.
Sounds scary. Okay, let's get on to James Bradley. He's a literary critic. He's written novels, novellas, YA books, and recently a book of non-fiction titled Deep Water, for which he received great acclaim. It's an amalgamation of history, science, and nature writing, and it reveals our oceans in all of their vital beauty. James has made a name for himself as being aware and educated around what we could only really call our sleepwalk towards climate change. And in this, his most recent book, James has made a bit of a detour. He's turned his hand to crime, yet the ocean does feature again. In Landfall, the ocean is lapping at the city of Sydney, where global warming and the melting of the ice caps have wreaked complete havoc. I asked James to give us a summary of the plot.
Landfall is a crime novel. It's set about 30 years from now in a Sydney that's been transformed by climate change. And it's about two detectives searching for a little girl who's gone missing from a section of the city they call the flood line, which is one of the low-lying bits of the city that's been kind of flooded by rising sea levels. And it's told from 3 points of view. One is the main detective, the other is her father, who's kind of in the advanced stages of dementia, and the third's a young Indonesian refugee kid who is tangled up in the story as well.
So it's a police procedural, but it's set in Sydney 30 years from now, and it's a very different Sydney to what we're used to. A lot has changed. You make the climate catastrophe that they're living through extremely real with lots of details.
Yeah, so I wanted the book to do a number of things. One of the things I really wanted it to do was to, I guess, make that experience of living in a climate-changed world real. And the book doesn't kind of oversell it. It's a kind of track that we're on. And it takes a lot of things that are kind of present in the world already, kind of flooding, heat, things like that, and just ratchets them up a bit and tries to give you a sense of a city that is, really struggling under the weight of these things. I wanted it to be kind of visceral like that. I wanted that sense of how difficult it is, but I also wanted that sense of the way normality and that kind of rupture can sit right next to each other.
Yeah, life still goes on. That is the amazing thing that I kept thinking throughout the book, is that we humans, we just seem to have an ability to keep going and endure, maybe when we shouldn't.
Maybe, but I actually think that's a really important thing to kind of come back to. I think that one of the things that happens when we think about climate, when we think about AI, a whole lot of the really big things that we're kind of grappling with at the moment, is that they seem so big and so difficult that we can't get to grips with them. So we just kind of don't think about them, and it seems to me that one of the things that, fiction can do really powerfully in this space is to give people a way of imagining their way into some of those kinds of things, of actually kind of thinking about what it would feel like. And perhaps if we can do that, we can kind of think about these things in a slightly more, I guess, kind of sophisticated or useful kind of way. Yeah,
you did make it seem very real. And I think, I sometimes wonder about the ability of literature to actually then promote real change. And as I was reading it, I thought, I have been, like everyone else, I suppose, inoculating myself against really truly accepting or noticing what I'm seeing and what I can see is going to happen. And I think that this book has changed my thinking, particularly prior to an election. We're heading to an election in a few days' time. Was that of any importance to you, the timing of when this book came out?
I didn't have a lot of control over the timing of when the book came out, I have to say.
Were you happy with the timing?
Oh, look, it doesn't hurt.
Yep.
But look, I mean, in an odd kind of way, the timing I was slightly worried about was because the book is the book's set over about 5 this kid while this little girl while this cyclone is bearing down on them, and when the storm hit Brisbane
it was
a couple of months ago,
Cyclone Alfred, yes.
There was part of me going in a really shallow kind of way, like I hope it's not too bad because then my book's going to look really exploitative. So in terms of timing, I was more bothered about that. But I mean, one of the things about timing is, I mean, I've now written a few novels in this space, and you put things into them, you put details into them, you put events into them, and often the things you're putting in are kind of extrapolation or they're just pure science fiction, and often I've now multiple times had that experience where things that you've written by the time the book comes out or not long after the book comes out are coming true. And that kind of sense that you're writing in a world where things are moving so fast that kind of reality is lapping fiction almost as fast as you can make it up is really disconcerting.
Yeah. I remember that some time ago watching, I think, a Tom Cruise movie, one of those Mission Impossible movies where he was touching the screen and things were moving around, and I thought, wow, how are they doing that? Now look at us. This only a few years ago.
That's the one based on the Philip K. Dick book, and it's got all of the incredibly athletic Tom Cruise whizzing things around and stuff. I'm not sure. I feel like you'd be getting a full body workout just from using that, but I think that's about Tom Cruise rather than about the technology.
Just an opportunity to show us his pets. I feel it is getting harder to hold on to optimism. I mean, 2025 has arrived. It's on its way out again. 2 degrees is a lot. We're getting closer and closer to that. Why is this issue practically invisible in the media? I see climate change as having so much potential to invigorate and inspire this amazing mind that we humans have. You know, what a great puzzle to solve. How exciting could it be? And yet, that doesn't seem to be the attitude we humans take. There are still people who will snarl at you because you have an interest in climate change. Why do you think that is? Why hasn't that side of our character come out more?
Look, I think that's a really complicated question. And I mean, and I think, and it's not just that people will snarl in your face. I mean, you're watching in the United States the kind of, the quite systematic dismantling of all of the work that's been done on this front and of the scientific and research structures that underpin our understandings of it. I mean, it's a really, really, what's going on in the States is really, really scary. I think it's a whole range of things. I think it's that these things are difficult to think about. Like I said before, I think they're very big, they're very hard, they kind of come to bear on a whole series of things that seem really kind of central to our kind of beings. But I also think it's that, you know, we have a political system in which the corporations and the kind of people who are driving the crisis have access to government in a way that people don't. I mean, you know, the continuing power of fossil fuel companies in Australia is real, and it affects both sides of government. And I think just that, you know, you've had a kind of derailing of action over this over many, many years, and you hear that all the time. I mean, I do think there is another story you can tell about all of this. And I mean, you said at the beginning that 1.5 is gone, 2 degrees is kind of looking really hard, and 2 degrees, I mean, the thing that people need to get their heads around is 2 degrees is catastrophic. You know, 2 degrees is not, you know, another thing. 2 degrees is catastrophic, and once you get over about 1.5 and up to 2 degrees, every increment from there increases the chance of non-linear change really significantly. So it's not just that it gets incrementally worse, it might get suddenly much worse. But I mean, I also think, you know, you can look at the good things. I mean, you know, South Australia is now running most of its power on renewables. I mean, you are seeing that there is a kind of economic shift going on, and it's real, and there's a level at which it can be slowed down. The US can opt out of it, but that technological change and the kind of structural changes that it's driving are really happening. And one of the things I think people need to get to kind of come to see is that, if you can build a sustainable world, you're actually building a fairer and cleaner and better world for all of us.
Yeah, there's potential for there to be joy and excitement and a sense of achievement in that humans also do like those emotions, I would have thought. But
yeah, I think they're all positive things. I mean, and I actually also think one of the things I really wanted to talk about in the book is that we get told at the moment in a whole lot of ways that cruelty is power. Do you know what I mean? You look at again at Trump and those people, and I don't think that's the case. One of the things I wanted to talk about in the book is that people often behave well. That people try and do the right thing. And that kind of sense that kindness matters.
You do have some lovely characters in the book. Obviously, Sadia, the inspector. We have Paul Finlay, her offsider. We have Tazim, who's the refugee, which is a lovely part of reading the book too. We can identify with those characters very strongly. I wonder, will there be another Sadia and Finlay book in the works? It
probably depends on this one, how this one goes. I mean, I have an idea for this one. One of the real joys about writing crime was being able to lean into, because I'd not written crime before.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of one of the real pleasures about it was it's such a capacious genre. It's such a wonderfully kind of expansive genre, but it's also a genre where the beats in it, the kind of business of it is so. It was lovely to kind of be able to kind of step into that, to take on those kind of beats of the genre and kind of play with them.
Yeah, the book certainly has a tempo. It's great. It's got a pace. I like how it does dip back into the past to explain some of the characters' motivations, and then they've got rich characters. And in my opinion, I think you could keep going with those characters and give us a couple more. It'd be lovely.
I'd love to do that.
Well, I hope it does go well and you get that opportunity. I think this is your 8th book of fiction, I think.
It's my 6th adult novel, and I did 3 YA novels as well. So it's
there you go.
My 9th.
Your 9th, fantastic. So you must read widely to be, so competent in all of those genres. I was wondering, what is on your Tsundoku? What have you been reading? What are you planning to read?
I've read a couple of fantastic things recently. One was a novel which I think, in fact, sits quite interesting next to Landfall. It's a fantastic novel by an American writer called Laila Lalami, called The Dream Hotel, which is set a couple of years from now in a world where the government can access your dreams while you sleep. And it's about algorithmic justice. It's about detention and private prisons. It's about surveillance. It's a really clever and very powerful novel. I read a terrific novel by a friend of mine called Jane Rawson. Not a novel, a terrific non-fiction book by a friend of mine called Jane Rawson, who's down in Tasmania, called Human Nature, which is a book about trying to think through a whole series of questions about how we think about nature in Australia, what we think about the natural world in Australia, and where those ideas come from. And Jane is a really, it's kind of a book about the natural world that's incredibly funny, because Jane's incredibly funny, and it's smart and it's funny, and isn't out yet. It comes out in a couple of weeks. A book that I think is one of the books of the year. It's an extraordinary book by Robert Macfarlane, the English writer, called Is a River Alive?, which is about trying to think through the ideas of rights of nature and the idea that, we should be thinking about rivers not as things but as living beings, and thinking about kind of the natural world in that way. It's an astonishing book.
Sounds fabulous. Well, James Bradley, thank you so much for Landfall. It's a book that's imaginative, but it is also steeped in reality, and it's a bloody good read. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Some nice recommendations there. That was The Dream Hotel by Laila Lalami, Human Nature by Jane Rawson, and Is a River Alive by Robert Macfarlane. That was James Bradley, author of Landfall. This is Tsundoku, the podcast for people who work to support their book habit.
Time to talk about Panic by Catherine Jinks. It's her latest thriller, and it's a rural noir offering. It seems the Aussie bush is teeming with survivalists and rogue groups of anti-government conspiracy theorists, although you'll hear from Catherine that there are some more straightforward reasons for some people belonging to these groups, but they're people who deny that the government has any legal control over them in any way whatsoever. And Bronte, who's heading to the country to get away from online fallout as payback for her revenge text to a cheating boyfriend, lands in a big house called Gwendoline, where she finds members of a sovereign citizens group that she's wandered into, behaving in a very deranged fashion. So here's Catherine Jinks explaining why her character Bronte is in so much trouble.
She put up a viral video, but it wasn't meant to be public. It went public, but part of the problem is that she's slagging off her boyfriend who has an online profile. So it's kind of like Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Like, there's a lot of fans out there and they don't like her. And it's creeping into the real world. So she's living in Katoomba, which is near where I live. And because it's a fairly small community, people know who she is. And there's a bit of real world stuff, which may or may not be her paranoia, but she's not sure, but it looks bad. And so she thinks she has to get out of there as well. Because she's young, she's kind of lost her casual work because she thinks because of her profile, she doesn't have much money. So she decides she'd go for HelpX, which is like Workaway. There's this service where people who need young people to, mostly on farms and places like that, do work, will give them bed and board but no salary. It's the fastest thing she can think of. So she just hops on the train and goes out to Bathurst after sort of linking up with a woman who's got a property out in Bathurst who offers her bed and board just for looking after her elderly mother. So she thinks that that's not going to be like all the other stuff that you have to do on HelpX sometimes, which is, you know, building walls and feeding horses and all this sort of stuff.
Digging toilets,
whatever, yeah.
And it seems like such a good idea, but sadly the Aussie bush these days seems to be teeming with survivalists and rogue groups of various kinds. I'm remembering Chris Hammer's book The Tilt, which I think has similar things going on. And poor old Bronte, she gets the full wacko package at the big house Gwendoline.
Well, she should have kind of known when she heard about Newborn, the crazy MLME type of thing that's going on there. But to be honest, let's face it, there's some interesting spiritual retreats out there.
Well, that's right. And Vida is into rebirthing and spiritual healing. And Bronte meets hostility right from the time someone opens the door to her, and she wonders what she's walked into.
Well, I mean, it's partly because the police are involved, but anyway, yeah.
Yes, and I thought, as I read, I thought, oh, Panic is a good title for this book because you've got your finger on the panic button or just hovering above it the whole of the narrative. And she's suffering from trauma already, and then the threatening people seem to come out of the woodwork at her from all sides. Who are some of these people by name? Who are some of the characters?
Okay, so there's Vida, she doesn't own the place. Her mother, Nell, does, but she kind of runs the place. Nell's kind of stuck in her upstairs bedroom most of the time. And then there's Vida's partner, Troy, who's probably not her husband, but, you know, is, I suppose her common law husband. And then there's this kind of tag-along woman called Prish, again, not her real name, who came apparently as a guest when this place was an Airbnb for a long time, but it's been transformed into a spiritual retreat. And she was kind of one of the earliest guests, and she sort of stayed around because she's kind of got, she's looking for a leader or something. And so she hangs around with Vida and does what Vida says kind of stuff. But those are the main people. There's a neighbour called Iris, but then there's the little team of common law assembly people, and they're kind of local. There's somebody in Dubbo, but there's also some local people who live in the area.
And I think you do that very well because as citizens ourselves, we're curious about what makes people take a stance like that. The sovereign citizens who are rejecting the government's claim to having any authority over them whatsoever. And so some of those people who you give us a little bit of backstory on, it becomes a bit clearer why they might gravitate to that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I did a lot of deep diving research into this, and what'll happen is there'll be some really nasty financial problem. It's often to do with property and stuff. It's often to do with local council, or if it's to do with, the bailiffs come in, whatever. What happens is taxes or, impositions, fees, this kind of stuff, they can't cope with it. And you're looking for a way of not having to pay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not having to be turfed out or whatever. And this offers you what they call pseudo law. This offers you what looks like a chance to go to court or to declare that this whole court is illegitimate, so you can't do this to me. You can understand it. You can totally understand what's going on with, what I did with this is it's a bureaucratic issue that kind of really tips the balance into sort of panic in this story. And it's to do with the sort of New South Wales trustee and guardian. The situation isn't great for the people involved. It's not great. So you can see why people grab at whatever they can to try and save themselves,
And also what shakiness there might be about their own psyches. And some of the people they attract are obviously deranged to start with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is hard not to have any power in a society at all. You know what I mean? So you're looking for an alternative sort of power structure.
Obviously, it's a ripping yarn and all sorts of things go wrong. And in a way, it's about how well our existing systems hold up, because Bronte's impulse is to call on them when things go badly wrong for Nell, who she's looking after, and just how badly people cope when they're completely untied from all of those.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. When I was researching it, which was way back, it was kind of very early COVID, and there was a story that popped up, and I thought, well, that's weird. Actually, it was a kind of a siege, and I started to look into that, and I just started to, I suppose, monitor what was happening. And I remember thinking, this isn't great. This could go quite wrong. This could go bad. All you need is one or two people who don't have any restraint. And next thing you know, the door of the old Parliament House was burning by some of the people that I'd been following, that I'd been keeping an eye on in the internet, because they post everything.
Yeah.
They film themselves and post everything. And I thought, yeah, see, and then I would literally just finish the book and was sending it off, and the siege in Queensland happened and the shootings. Wow. And I just thought, the minute I saw it, I thought, I bet that's a soft sit. And it was. Fortunately, and you know what, I was thinking just lately, and it's been a while, and it finally got published, and I'm thinking, things seem to have calmed down a bit. And then I looked online, and of course it hasn't at all. There was some protest just recently. It was supposed to be outside Parliament House. It was the usual kind of stuff. It tends to be around anti-vax, illegitimate government, pedophile rings is and it's supposed to be the Vatican and Masonic and the Masons and the global banking cartel all working together. It's very...
That's right. And your people, the Sovsits we're dealing with in this book, talk about satanic pedophiles all the time, and your impulse as a reader is to laugh, but of course it's not very funny. I mean... No,
it's not. And the problem is, there are pedophile rings.
Yeah.
It's just not the ones they're talking about, you know what I mean? So it does tend to do a disservice to the people who have been, damaged by them, because there's a lot of sort of cry wolf situation there. It's sad.
Well, I hope we've given a sense of how much is going on in this book, and in fact, it's just it's staying in my head and making me think a lot. And of course, the global political situation, and isolationism going on big scale is making us all think. But what it comes down to, and what locks you into the book, is that you invest in Bronte, of course, and the things that are coming at her are coming so strong and steady. You wonder what it is that's going to keep her sane, and she's already traumatised. She somehow manages it. What are the key things that keep her from falling to bits?
Okay, first of all, her mother's obviously extremely loving, so she has that foundation. That's one thing. In terms of her mental health, you know what I mean? Secondly, funnily enough, okay, even though social media has to some degree damaged her badly, she also uses it in a way to save herself to some degree as well, which is really interesting. And then also, of course, she has an extremely nice copper at her side.
She does, Reese. And then there's Iris.
Oh, and Iris, of course, an extremely nice nurse.
Yeah.
Nurses, I think, are very reliable people.
All right. Let's finish off with a little look backwards, Kathy, at your now long and star-studded career, which started off and maybe still includes writing for children, does it?
I have just sent something off. I don't know if anybody will want it. It's a bit of a tricky time to get published these days, so you just plug on. So I have sort of ducked out for the last few years doing these because I got some, actual traction on the thrillers. So I just kept on. You do what you can get sold, basically. But I mean, I'm not ruling it out. And I've just, as I said, just finished a sort of an older children's one. I don't know if it'll get a birth, but we'll see.
Well, even this one, young adults are pretty cluey, and she's 22.
Yes.
What's the definition of a young adult?
I would say young adult is pretty much between about 15, 16 through to about 18, 19, to be honest. That's put it this way. That's what the young adult literary marketing block is supposedly. Because, I mean, when you get to 18, you're an adult, really, theoretically.
And think what you were reading at 19. I bet it probably wasn't young adult fiction. It was, what?
Well, there wasn't much young adult fiction around when I was. I mean, I suppose Patricia Wright's and Weirin books and everything were probably young adult.
Yeah.
But they was just children, and then there was adult. There was no young adult. So yeah.
Anyway, I would think that a smart young adult might be very interested in this one with the issues that it raises.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, it's interesting because the last 3 thrillers that I wrote were all kind of middle-aged women as the main characters. Shelter was a woman I think she was about 50 odd. The second one, she was probably about 40. And then the third one, she's probably close to my age, like she's in her late 50s. So it was interesting to go back to the young one. And the thing is, it is like I'm pretty ancient now, but fortunately I have a 28-year-old daughter. So she was 27 at the time, actually. But she helped me with some of my more egregious social media mistakes.
I was very impressed by it. You seem to be completely all over that.
Well, that's thanks to her. Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Hannah. And finally, without giving any spoilers, but you seem to leave the door open for a sequel with what happens right at the very end.
I mean, if somebody wanted me to write another one, I definitely would. It's more, it's just the sense that it's almost like that thing where you think, finish, woo, all done. Oh, no, it's that, you know what I mean? It's just that thing where life goes on, shall we say.
Well, I, for one, would be very keen to see what happens with Bronte and Reese. And meanwhile, thank you for writing this one. I loved it to bits.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
So, if there is a sequel to Panic, we'll be looking forward to that. Catherine Jinks talking about her latest thriller, A Rural Noir.
This is Tsundoku, the podcast for readers of all ages.
I have 3 books from Star Wars, and in A Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon Jinn's Padawan is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Qui-Gon dies. There's little slug guys who are also in Revenge of the Sith, but they die in Revenge of the Sith. And
What are some good things that happen?
well, in the original trilogy, Luke Skywalker blows up the Death Star, and Emperor Palpatine, Chancellor Palpatine is a character. He is an emperor, and he gets a melted grey face. He actually doesn't die in any of them. It looks like he dies in Return of the Jedi, but he comes back in The Force Awakens.
Okay, what if we talk a little bit about a happy book like Wonka?
Well, he makes a chocolate factory in the end. A girl, Noodle, keeps getting thrown in the pit when she's doing actually nice stuff, but Mrs. Scrubbit throws her in the pit because Mrs. Scrubbit's true identity is actually evil.
Do you know who wrote Wonka?
Roald Dahl. And I know a lot of other Roald Dahl books, so Fantastic Fox, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, BFG, Giraffe. Oh, and what's it called? Is it Danny's Dad or something? I think it's Danny's Great Dad.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Tsundoku. I'm Kath Keneally.
And I'm Michaela Andreev. Happy reading and catch you next time.
This podcast is produced by 4 book addicts refusing treatment.
Sarah Martin.
Annie Hastwell.
Michaela Andreev.
And me, Kath Keneally. Our thanks to composer Quincy Grant for the music. If you want to find out more about the books and authors featured in this program, check out the show notes. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Tsundoku Cast, which is TSUNDOKU Cast.